Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome.
Right. Fantastic. Hi, everyone. And sorry for my laryngitis. Now it's perpetually there forever on the recorded session. So I'm Dan Egan, and I'm here representing the board of directors and the Cord Connects program. I'm super excited to have our team here today on what appears to be a very popular topic based on the number of people that are here live on getting a submission accepted to the Cord conference. Um, our speakers are here to share their insight and encourage you to take part in this in a live way through questions in the chat that they'll go into in terms of trying to facilitate. And this session is recorded and will be available on the website, so others can also learn from your questions afterwards. So please feel free to do that. And thanks so much for being here, and thank you to our speakers. I will have to jump off because I have another FGME meeting. But thanks so much for joining us, and I will turn it over, I guess, to Molly as our leader. Thank you.
Thanks so much for the introduction. And hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on what started off, at least in Chicago, as a very thunderstormy Tuesday. So for those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting before, my name is Molly Estes. I'm clinical faculty at Northwestern University in Chicago, brand new starting clerkship director here. I'm going to be moderating this panel of amazing discussants. And I kind of say it in that tone of voice because we're just going to have a conversation. As Dr. Egan said, the topic of today's Cord Connects is how to put together, craft, create, imbibe a proposal with all of the power that it needs in order to make it through the selection process for academic assembly. For those of you who are not aware, proposals are now open, submissions are now open for proposals. And so you are getting all of this information in real time, just in time teaching, as it were, in order to go through that process. So I'm going to let our panel go ahead and introduce themselves, starting with Jess.
So I see a lot of familiar names and faces on here. I'm Jess Pelletier. I'm finishing my medical education fellowship in 2 days here at WashU in St. Louis. I'll be starting as an assistant professor of emergency medicine and an assistant program director at University of Missouri in August. And I was feeling really honored to be asked by Megan and Molly to come join this panel. And I'm excited to be here and chat with you guys about submitting to Cord and national conferences.
Thank you so much for being here. And Shri, I'm going to hand it over to you next.
Hey everyone, so excited to be here. I'm Serena Desha. I'm one of the APDs here at Duke, and I've really been involved with Cord in a lot of different ways, including being part of like the track chair planning committees for the Navigating Academic Waters, as well as the MedEd scholarship track and the Cord DEI track. So I can give a little bit of a lens from that aspect as well. And then also involved in some of the committees, including the Cord DEI committee and also the Cord Academy for Scholarships. So definitely excited to share with you just some of the things I've learned from many, many talented people who have been great mentors to me, especially a lot of the ones here on the call today. And I'm really excited to help you be successful as well.
Thank you for being here. And last, but certainly not least, Guy.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Guy Carmelli. I'm over in beautiful Massachusetts right now, enjoying the weather. And I've spent the past few years in the Cord Planning Committee, mostly on the best practice track. And this track is one that sees a good chunk of the submissions. So I have a lot of experience just pouring through hundreds and hundreds of submissions each year to kind of see what jumps out at me so that I can pick the very few that make it to our track. And so hopefully I can share some of my insights of what I noticed the past few years and what might help you in, getting your talk selected for our next conference.
So for those of you who have been trying to see the connection of everybody's roles and being asked to be on the panel, we have pulled people who are newer in the process of proposal submission, somebody who's significantly experienced and has learned from a lot of other people before them, and then somebody who is actively reviewing proposals for academic assembly this year, just so that you got a variety of perspectives. So like I said, this is going to be a fun conversation. We're going to kick it off with a question for Jess. So just to get everything started. And I guess when it comes to beginning a proposal submission, you have to start with a topic. So how in the world, when you were starting this process, did you even choose what topic you wanted to submit a proposal on?
Yeah, that's a great question, Molly. So it definitely took me a while after residency to kind of figure out what my niche areas were. And I submitted some talks and did some talks at national conferences on things that were not particularly exciting to me before I was like, okay, this is actually what I like and what I don't. And I think that's okay at the beginning to sort of fumble around and try out different stuff to know what you like and what you don't, and see how the audience responds. During the first year that I was submitting, so my last year of residency, I had a mentor who kind of helped prompt me on topics and like basically looked over everything before I submitted it. And then once I started fellowship, it was more, okay, I'm going to pick things that fall within my buckets of things I enjoy, but also where I see that there's been holes or gaps in prior conferences. So the previous year when I attended, I wanted to know more about X and I didn't see anything about that. Or kind of running along a theme. I love high acuity, low occurrence diseases and procedures. So I try to pick things that people find annoying and challenging to treat on shift and find a way to like make it simpler so that easy, like brains can understand it. Like I need it simplified for myself. And so I try to find a way to make things more digestible for other folks. And that's something that seems to, have a good response or good feedback from the audience in person, because people want to make stuff easier. And so I have somebody kind of look over once I've got my submission typed up. I honestly will tag my husband for this most of the time and be like, hey, does this make sense? Is the topic cool? Would you want to know about this if you were an ER doctor? And he's like, I guess so. Or no, that's boring. Pick something else. So I'm lucky to have him in my corner. But kind of each year I start brainstorming while I'm at the conference and I make a list of this was missing. I wanted more of this, and then I go from there and start working on my topics.
I
And no,
love how
it's
Oh, no,
good
go
what
for
you
it, guys.
said,
You know.
about like the non-sexy topics. I mean, in academic assembly, we're not doing a lot of clinical talks, but there's certainly topics that, like the sexy topics of like slide design and stuff, it'll be kind of hard to get your like that accepted. But the less attractive ones like remediation, they're like very important and they're not like so exciting that so many people want to submit on it. And it's one of those things that you frequently have to talk about because like a lot of people may not necessarily attend or pay attention to remediation talk for many years until they are tasked with having to do a remediation. Now all of a sudden it's relevant to them, and so they will go to that. So there's topics that aren't super sexy, but needs to be done, each year, and those are great like avenues to submit.
And also being thoughtful, I think, about which track you want to submit to can be really important because each track has a different audience that it's trying to reach. And so being thoughtful about that can really help you to choose the topic and the niche that you're interested in. For example, if you're interested in like medical student education, right, then CDM would be the track that you're looking at. And then even looking back at the previous, like last year's submissions and what got accepted and looking at their objectives and goals and all the things can really kind of give you an idea of like, what are the general themes of ideas that get accepted to that track? Because I know Guy could probably attest to this, is everything gets submitted to the best practice track, but some of them are not the content that would normally appear there, right? And so that's where it's being thoughtful about, similar to journals, right? It's like submit to the track that's going to actually, put out that content itself. And learning from the past can really make a big difference in helping you create your content.
Yeah, and there's something to be said there for making sure you don't like reinvent the wheel that was just done the year before. So if you come up with an idea looking at the previous year's conference booklet and say like, oh, somebody already did this, but they're missing this particular piece that I think I could add something to. So making sure you're not just doing the same talk over again.
So I also love how you mentioned that you had a mentor to kind of help you along. And we're going to table that conversation for just a second, or to come back around to in just a second, because I think that we could probably do an entire Chords Connects, on that in particular. And none of us have gotten where we are without people who have gone before us. But instead, I want to pivot a little bit to kind of like the nuts and bolts of putting together a proposal once you actually have your topic selected. And Guy, I'm going to throw it over to you because we always talk about those objectives, those learning points, those takeaways. And I don't know about you guys, but man, sometimes those are just onerous to write. And yet I know from the proposal side of things, review side of things, those are really, really vitally important. So Guy, what are you looking for when you're looking at a mountain of proposals? What makes one stand out? What are the parts that really catch your attention?
Yeah, of course. I'm gonna address like four different things. First is topic relevance, and then that it's well put together, content expertise, and then uniqueness. So let's discuss topic relevance. So, Court Academic Assembly, it's mainly for medical educators. So right away, I notice is like a lot of topics that are like full clinical talks, or like how to, get a certain view on ultrasound. And that is very interesting, but not specifically relevant to Court Academic Assembly. Or, like Shri mentioned, people will submit a talk to the wrong track. I see this frequently in like best practice, and people kind of misinterpret, what the best practice track is. It's not so much that you have information that you believe is best practice, because like every lecture hopefully is like someone's belief that is best practice. It's more geared toward, like all comers. We're talking about vice chairs of education, DIOs, PDs, talking about like, big topics that apply to on a larger level to programs as a whole. If you have a technology talk and you're submitting to BP, it might be better suited for MedTech, for example. If you're talking about a clerkship, that might be better suited for CDEM. So make sure that your topic is relevant to the conference and to the track. Also, well put together. A lot of people are submitting maybe like 5 to 10 talks, and some of those talks are just going to be like very bare bones skeleton, like the learning objectives aren't fully written, the description is very minimal, and so I can tell right away that it doesn't seem like the submission was well put together, and so I don't have high faith that the talk will be well put together. Content expertise. I want to know that you're the right person to talk about this talk. I wouldn't, ask a cardiologist to give a talk on intraparenchymal hemorrhages. And so, you have to kind of justify, why you're talking about this. So did you do a study, or have you done a proper lit search? Have you spoken on this topic before? And then finally, unique and different, as Jessa just mentioned, like some people will do a talk and then resubmit that same talk the following year. I right away nix all like talks that are like identical. If you're going to be doing the same topic, it's got to be like a new flavor or like a new update or something more interesting. And so like getting a sense of what's been done before will be very helpful.
Those are really, really awesome tips and insights, especially since it's kind of like knowing the test before you take it, right? So now that we know what the end result is, how do we go about crafting a proposal that fits all of those things? So let's take it from the other direction then. So when it goes into writing a good description, great learning objectives, to really putting your best foot forward in order to try to get it to a point of where it's going to catch Guy's eye. Jess and Shri, like, what have been your methods for approaching this? Shri, let's start with you. You mentioned before we started recording that you had gotten a lot of mentorship in this area, that you've learned from a lot of other people. Maybe tell us where you started, and then how that has changed for you over the years in response to some of that feedback.
Yeah, I think I still remember, like being a new junior faculty member in Cord and submitting like a lot of talks to Cord and never getting anything accepted. And so I was just like, what is happening? Like I promised, because when I went to Cord, I would see some of the same topics presented, right? So I knew the idea was accepted, right? But just maybe my submission was not. And so it really made me reach out for mentorship. And I think we'll probably talk about that a little bit later, but at least the kind of nuts and bolts of like, how do you create a good description and learning objectives? There's a few things that I think about. One is, once again, tying to Jess, is like starting with your purpose. Like, what is the message that you want to convey? Is it like to inspire? Is it to motivate? Is it to like shine light on a topic? Really thinking about like, what is that niche and what is your purpose in sharing that niche to other people is really important. The second is really the title. So the title is key because most people actually, even on the app, they'll decide if they go to a talk or not a lot of times just based on that title alone. So it really does need to be clever. And I remember back to a talk that Dr. Omomatu gave about audience-centered speaking. And what he talked about was, there's some words that can really help you with this. So some good words, for example, might be like pearls, pitfalls, medical legal malpractice, those type of things. But really great words are the ones that really like make you stop, right? We're ER doctors, we like that kind of epinephrine kind of jolt. And so maybe some of those words might be like fatal or like catastrophe or killer. Or one talk that I got accepted the last year was like diseases of collaboration, right? Talking about like some of the problems with collaboration and how to make that more successful. And we labeled it diseases of collaboration. So you can see that makes it a little bit more interesting than like, how do you collaborate with others, right? That's not as cool and doesn't draw people in. So title definitely matters.
I am a sucker for a good title, not to interrupt your flow, but I'm just saying like, yeah, that is spot on. You just basically described everything about how I take an initial look at a program.
Yes. And especially I think from the review side of things, I've also done the review side of things is we'll get a lot of talks on the same topic itself. So this is really where the title, the description, but especially those objectives really make a difference between which ones get accepted and which ones don't, because it really needs to be thought out. So this description to me, when I'm looking for like which ones to accept, and also when I'm writing my own description, is how do I make this in a way that the audience can walk away with something? Because we know none of us like to just sit in a 20-minute or 50-minute talk and be like, I'm just going to think about this and reflect on it, but not know what to do with that content. So how do you really make it so that they can translate this into behavior changes later on? Because that really is like the ultimate, success in giving a great talk. And similarly for the objectives, really be intentional about how you're going to actually convey that information. I still pull out my Bloom's taxonomy. I'm a nerd about it, but I still look at the hierarchy of like Bloom's taxonomy verbs and be like, which ones are good? Like describing something that's not as great as if they're actually able to like critically appraise something or, actually put something into practice, right? Those higher parts of that pyramid that we see. And you could just Google Bloom's taxonomy as we're talking to make this a working session. But definitely you pull that out as you're making your objectives and really think about which ones can actually be most impactful. And it can also help you then when you're planning your talk to incorporate that active learning that we really want to see to really engage our audience to be excited about that content and really interact with that content.
I actually have it specifically written down that I was going to ask you guys if you use those lists of action verbs that we're all supposed to use. And so it looks like between the two of you, unanimous, yes. So believe it or not, there are some things that you are told to do that are actually helpful. So for everybody listening, that one is actually helpful. And I realized about 10 seconds ago that I neglected to mention at the very beginning of the session to all of our audience members, if you do have a question as we're going through, please feel free to put it in the chat. We do not have a specific outline that we are following, and so we'd be most grateful and most pleased if this session was able to actively address your questions in real time. So please feel free to do that. Jess, I'm going to kick it over to you then. So how do you go about crafting your proposal?
Yeah, so like Sri, I actually pull up the Bloom's taxonomy of action verbs and I write my objectives first. And then I often will wait a day or two and then come back and write the talk. I find that or the proposal, so to speak, I think having some sleep on it and kind of having that time to process in your brain, like how could this actually be constructed to meet the objectives? And then at the end, once you've written it, go back again and make sure, are all of these objectives met by what I'm doing in the talk? How can I make this more engaging? And then thinking carefully about, should this be a poster presentation or should this be a track talk kind of thing? So, if you're talking about like a one-time, delivery of some sort of teaching tool versus like, this is a longitudinal curriculum that has components built out that people can use and work with, like that's going to help make the distinction for you of like, would this be better served as a poster and a brief chat versus, oh, I have a lot to say on this thing. And then the next level of like a longer talk, have I built an entire curriculum that I can hand to people and I show them how to use it by the end of this talk? And so I think thinking really carefully about not only which track you submit to, but also what type of presentation you submit before you submit it is really helpful.
in kind of in conjunction with the type of talk that you were submitting for. So for those who are unaware, there's multiple different types that you can submit. So you can submit workshops, panel presentations, panel discussions, kind of like what we're doing now, lightning talks, which are which are 7 to 8 minute talks, regular size talks, which are 20-minute talks, and a couple of others are on there. And similarly to how there are different styles of talks that you can submit, there are different rules about the number of presenters you can have for talks based off of the length of them. So for example, the lightning talks, you can't have more than 2 people on stage for that talk. So if you are doing a group proposal submission, how do you go about coordinating that with everybody? Is it usually one person who takes lead and kind of does it all? Is it a group effort? We all know the stories about herding cats in ER docs. Yeah. So how do you guys handle that one?
I could probably start because I think I rarely do a talk by myself. I love collaborating with others. I think that is a fun part about like across different time zones, different institutions. This is really where you get to build your network. So it's not just going to be for a national talk, but it'll be for ideally lifelong friendships, right? That you're going to make instead. I found that there's 2 different ways. One way is that you could have your group of people talk, and then each person takes a lead on the talk itself, and it takes, the lead of writing the goals, the description, the objectives, and all the rest, and actually submitting it for the group itself. The other is the easier way, I would say, is probably like 1 or 2 of the speakers will kind of come up with the talk itself and then send it to the other group members to kind of look at. I would definitely recommend that if you're doing it the latter, you should definitely build in a buffer. We're all about Dr. Gottlieb and we're all about soft and hard deadlines, right? So your soft deadline needs to give you at least a 2-week window or so to hear back from your colleagues before the actual deadline, which I usually actually even make before the actual core deadline, because it gives me a little bit of buffer room that if I don't hear back from my members, I still have like 3 or 4 days that I can kind of ping them and kind of get them to answer back before the actual deadline passes. So it's really important to think about that. But definitely there's both ways are effective, but it's just a matter of, the time of the year, and we know it's busy in July. So just the bandwidth of your team as well too. So both can be successful. I've done it both ways and have had it successful as well.
I'm definitely
I will say that,
I was just going to make a bad joke about missing deadlines. So Guy, take it away.
Like when I look at a lot of the submissions, of the different lengths, it's slightly easier to, justify fitting in some of the smaller 20, 10, 20, 30-minute talks. If you're submitting like a 50-hour long talk, it better be really like, ground breaking to like get that, prime time real estate. And so I tend to not pick like a whole lot of those, at least in the BP track. Some of the other tracks might. And also I get a little worried about like these large groups, because like every year, like we struggle to really get the speaker list for these groups. Because I think in July, you ask anyone, hey, what are you doing in March? You cool to come? Yeah, throw me on there. Like, no problem. And they don't really think too much of it. And then like February comes along and people are dropping like flies. And so I think that you should really spend time like making sure that your group is your group and they can come, because it's so hard on the back end to try to like, makeshift a last minute group.
And just for our audience, like the track chairs actually stay on for about 3 years, right? They're like the junior track chair, the track chair, and then the past track chair. So we know who's really good at submitting their like disclosures or CME and following through. And we also get to know who we have to herd cats to get them to do that. And you can imagine it's easier to work with those who are actually following the deadlines and getting everything in, and they're more likely to be invited again versus those that we have to kind of chase after, because the track for a whole week of court, it's a lot of speakers and a lot of things going on. And so you can imagine if we have to track down even, a quarter of those speakers, that takes a lot of time for the track chairs to do. So being willing to stay on track with deadlines will really help you to be able to be asked back again too.
And I do appreciate the couple of people who put questions in the chat. Layla, you've already got your question answered. I was going to actually throw it out to Guy, but I completely agree with exactly what Jess and Shri responded with. If you have submitted in the past and your proposal got rejected for some reason in the past, that does not mean that you should not try to submit it again. Definitely go through it with a fine-tooth comb, make sure that you've really built out your description and your learning objectives, that everything is solid with it. But we get hundreds of proposals every single year. And unfortunately, as good as a lot of them are, we're not able to accept everything. So just because a topic was rejected in the past does not mean that it's not a good topic or going to automatically be rejected again in the future. Sometimes it's just luck of the draw for that particular year. Here's a teasing question for the entire panel. What do you guys think are the hot button topics this year? What are we all hoping to hear a talk on at Cord?
I think there's going to be a lot of AI submissions, and it's fine. Like those were super popular at the last Cord and SAM and whatnot, and so like there's going to be some. Because everyone's going to be submitting it, I think that hopefully you'll have something unique, some expertise. You're not just a person who enjoys it, but like I'm hoping you've at least tried it, clinically and can talk about it, because we've all kind of heard this stuff. I more want to see like, can this actually be applied educationally, and do you have evidence behind that? So hopefully you have some sort of expertise in it, or it's something unique that it's not just like pearls of AI use or pitfalls or ethics behind. I feel like those are like the starter stuff that we've heard, but I don't know. Sri, Jess, what do you guys think?
Yeah, AI definitely, I think, was going to be the one that I also was thinking about too. And I agree that I think having some expertise in that area or some sort of like knowledge or skill set in that would be helpful to understand too. I think also it again ties back to that track that you want to be part of, to kind of then think about what topics would be relevant to that track itself. For example, I was involved with the Navigating Academic Waters track for so many years, and that audience is for early faculty, right? So that transition from resident to attending and clinical teaching and giving feedback and all of these things are topics that should happen in that track and do happen every single year. So what are some novel ways that you can actually present that to actually help to help that audience to learn about that topic in a different light, I think is important. And similarly for CDEM, right? A lot of it is on like med student education and even some remediation stuff even, and also just like rotations and so on, is how do you make it engaging for that, and even recruitment as well too, I think, because our sub-and med students are the ones that we also want to recruit for residency as well. So those are the kind of topics you want to think about as you're applying for that track. So just be really intentional about which track you want to be part of, and that can really make a big difference in getting things accepted.
You're muted, Jess.
Thank you. I think the hybrid interview transition, and some programs doing virtual and some doing hybrid, is probably going to also be an interesting topic that people will be submitting on. I know we talk about that a lot here in terms of like, what is the best way to navigate this awkward situation we're in post-pandemic world. So I think that will probably also be a topic that we'll see a lot of.
I think
Yeah.
also like among like diversity, equity, inclusion, just being part of the co-chair, there is a lot of discussion about how that fits in our world, right? How do we still stay true to wanting to create inclusive spaces and equity for our learners, and increase the diversity that we're bringing in. So definitely that is something that's on all of our minds kind of in our current climate. And just a plug for our virtual conference coming up in September is going to be on reaffirming DEI in our current climate as well too. So you can imagine that this will also still be relevant for our Cord Academic Assembly as well too. So those are also topics that are so important to our community that we want to hear more about.
And if I'm correct, you are accepting proposals for that conference,
We
correct?
are, yes. It will be opening up this upcoming week as well too. So definitely keep an eye out. There'll be two. So just so you're not confused, there's the Cord Academic Assembly, which is for our March conference. And then we'll also be accepting the submissions for our virtual conference that we have every year, which is the Cord DEI virtual conference.
I'm kind of wondering if we don't see some proposals and some potential talks about how a couple some of the political environment that's going on in the country right now, if we begin to see some talks about how that could potentially affect residency training and recruitment as well, in some states that have recently been changing some of their regulations. So those are at least some of our thoughts about what might happen. But of course, academic assembly is all about the bread and butter of stuff that we need to be able to do our jobs too, right? So I personally am hoping that we get some talks about mid-career people, because that's kind of almost sort of pretty much where I'm at. And I'm realizing that even though I really am enjoying everything that I'm doing, obviously I get to hang out with cool people like you. I could use maybe a little bit more information about how to challenge myself over the next 5 years. So pretty excited about that. So I did mention that we had to table the topic of mentorship for later. Later is now. So none of us have gotten anywhere in life without people to help us along the way. And for our audience, Dr. Carmelli had to drop off because children are, yes, more important than Cord Connects, although we greatly thank him for his expertise and his time away from his daughter in order to be here. So he's with us in spirit still. But Justin, Shree, I'm going to put the two of you on the spot and say, okay, so
I came back.
you're back.
She was not wanting to nap, but I have some puffs and hopefully.
Oh my gosh! And now we have
keep
the
hanging out.
youngest panel member on the call too. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic.
So go on.
No, this is even better. I couldn't have planned that better if I tried. Okay, so who is your mentor, mentors, plural? How did you find them? How have they helped you along the way? When do you listen to your mentor? When do you kind of maybe branch out on your own? Because sometimes they don't always have the right advice for you. I say that having a very well-intentioned mentor tell me very early on in my career that this should be my niche. And try as I might, it was not my niche. And so what are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I'm still being very early career. I've already gone through a series of mentors of kind of figuring out like who's a good fit and then realizing like I need different mentors for different things. So I've got my bucket of kind of halo things that I have mentors for, like how do I teach people how to address these really scary diseases and procedures, and then global emergency medicine education. And I need two very different sets of mentors for those things. And so I go to different people for those topics and kind of pick their brain on, do you think this is a topic that would interest you if I presented this at a conference? Now and then I'll have them read over my submissions before I submit them. Kind of bouncing back to the group submission topic that Sri was mentioning earlier, I find that more and more my submissions are with a group of people because it's great to have a Google Doc and I can put like a bare bones submission down and then have people make it better because they've got expertise in areas that I don't, or they have an eye for what sort of grammatical placement of words looks and sounds better to the reader. So, I think leaning on the strengths of other people and then being willing to do that in return, so that, people know that you're a person to come to. The more of these proposals from other people that you read, the more you can see like, oh, this is how I could even make my next proposal better. They did this thing that I never thought of doing before. So I think offering to mentor others as well can be really, really helpful for your own personal growth with submissions.
Yeah, and I'll say this is a great way to kind of build your network, definitely joining the committees and so on, or even when you go to Cord, if you see someone that's speaking on a topic that you're interested in, this is a great time to like go there and talk to them, and maybe you can collaborate together for a talk for the upcoming year instead, right? Because you have someone who has expertise, who has already spoken at Cord that you can then kind of learn from together. So it's a great, I think, opportunity to grow your network, your expertise, and have, other people that can kind of become part of your team as well too. And I definitely agree with Jess. I think it's so important to then give back to others as well in that same way. So when people are reviewing your proposals and your objectives and fixing it, also offer that as you're learning, then offer that to your junior faculty as well to really help them to kind of learn the ropes. Or even I would definitely want to bring up the idea of sponsorship and allyship, because I think that's so important. And this is that we want to hear new voices, we want to hear diverse voices. And this is a great time. Whenever I write a talk, I always pause and think like, who else can we add to this talk that has that expertise, has that enthusiasm, but may not have had that opportunity, because we know there still is an opportunity gap that exists, especially for women in medicine, for our underrepresented in medicine colleagues as well too. That this is a great time that we can sponsor them to really be part of the talk, but that even more so really help them to grow their expertise and their skill levels as well too. So as like when I'm mentoring someone for the submission, I also want to let them know I'm here to help you to plan the talk as well, because one part is getting the talk accepted. The second part is like, I need you to show up and completely kill it, right? Do an amazing job that the audience is like standing ovation, being like tears in their eyes. This is amazing. That type of, acceptance is what we're looking for. And that's what I want to help them to be able to do. And this might even take quite a bit of my time, but I'll listen to their talk, give them feedback on the slides, all the things to really help them to be successful. So definitely, as you're thinking of your submissions that you're doing, think about who else in your team that you might be able to add to your talk that might bring a different perspective, a diverse perspective to that topic. And it'll also offer that opportunity that we know oftentimes is missing for a lot of our colleagues.
What are your thoughts, Guy?
Yeah, I think, if you're especially a new speaker, it's good to kind of talk to people who've had more experience, or like have them, be added to your proposal just to help you out. It is challenging when you're trying to select, proposals and there's speakers who've never spoken before. It's like you're unsure, like if how they're going to be. But if they are there with somebody who has spoken more, then it's a little easier. And then, yeah, she agrees. But generally, I have like a bunch of mentors that I use for different situations, and yeah, it's always helpful.
You're good. You're good.
And Molly, I'll say, like, when I had mentioned like the first 3 years that I was submitting those proposals and none of them got accepted, I remember I reached out to actually Mike Gottlieb, who was a good friend, and asked him, I was just like, I really want to speak at Cord. I've gone to like a million of your talks. Like, how do I get accepted? And the two things I remember that he did was he was like, let me look at your proposal. And he helped me to really make it really a high quality proposal. And I got to learn from that process of like, seeing a lot of red on my Google Doc and being like, okay, I know nothing, but then learning and being like, okay, I know something, I'm learning something. But then also he said, put my name on the submission. He was like, I've spoken at Cord. They know that I've spoken at Cord, and it got accepted that year, right? So really kind of partnering with others there to kind of help can make a big difference, and also help you along that train of learning what kind of submissions actually are high quality and the components that they need as well.
Let's answer this question from the audience. So say you are a brand new speaker. Who do you reach out to? How do you get plugged in? How do you break through that initial barrier in trying to seek out mentorship?
I was actually just typing an answer to this question, so I'm glad you asked it out loud.
Okay.
So if I see anyone with a remotely overlapping topic on like the Cord list when I get to the conference, I make sure I go to every one of those talks and I go introduce myself at the end of the talk, and try to sort of make friends and connections with them. And even if it doesn't lead to any like collaboration or future mentorship opportunity, it does create like, okay, down the road, if I ever have a project on that topic, this is the person I'm going to email, and we can work on something together. And then similar actually to what Sri said, I have gone to talks at Cord and been like, wow, that was an awesome talk. I need to find out like what this person did to build their public speaking skills, or how they wrote that talk behind the scenes. And I've just gone up to people and said, hey, can I have your email address? And I've sent them questions by email. Maybe that's too bold, but I think it can be really helpful to learn how like the experts do what they do.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend when you go to Cord, like the two things, definitely listen for content, please, because they worked really hard to make that content, but also watch how they actually deliver that information itself. It really is like an education that can really help you, but then also keep it authentic to yourself, when you're presenting as well too, because some of the jokes might land for them, but that might not work for you as well too. But I agree with Jess that meeting people and asking them, and just you'll rarely have someone say, no, don't put my name on that. If you say, hey, I have a couple ideas for national talks, is it okay if I write them up and send them to you so maybe we can collaborate? Most people's universal answer is like, that sounds amazing, right? That you're gonna that we could do this together, right? I think rarely, and that's actually in some ways variously how I started my journey of reaching out to people as well, as just coming up with ideas and knowing that they have spoken on it and wanting to collaborate and make relationships that really helped them. And you kind of universally, they did not say no. They said, yes, that sounds great, and helped me to create a high quality submission.
Yeah, I think I had more success if you just go up to someone like, oh, I'd love, to join you on a talk, and it seems like the work is on them, it won't happen. But if you are like saying, I'll do all the work, I'll start the submission and stuff, I love your expertise on it, I have more luck in getting them, to join and then help out and stuff. And that's the same for like projects and stuff. Don't just be like, I'd love to do a research project with you and hope that they will like add you to their already done like clinical trial, but rather you want to be first author and do something and you like their help, it's like you're more likely to get it.
And then the other question that we had in the chat, do you ever have a list of topics you would like for people to take on? I think that perhaps the answer to this is I always have a running list of topics in my head, but I'm not really sure where or what to do and go with them. And I'm going to link this back to actually one of Shree's answers that she had in the chat for the last question, which is as I have gotten more involved with committees and groups and other stuff within Cord, as I'm just talking with people and bouncing ideas off of them, all of a sudden, out of that conversation will come a more fully fledged idea of something that we can take on together. Because I agree with everybody else. Everybody loves a group project. Group projects are so much more fun than trying to do it all on your own. But what about you guys? Do you ever have just a list of topics that you kind of are like, oh, that would be great, and ready to hand out to other people around you? Kind of ties back to the being a mentor topic as well.
One simple way that I do is actually I keep a list of the subjects that I've submitted each year, and then I highlight the ones that have gotten accepted, the ones that haven't. So I put that in green, right? Yay, go, right, go time, right? That's great. But then the ones that haven't, I put it in yellow. I don't use red because that feels kind of negative. I use yellow, like not yet, right? This is just not the right time for this, and maybe I need to do something else to fix that instead. And so that's where, and then when the call for the next year's submission comes, I'll revisit that idea and say, like, is this the time or not? And how can I fix the submission to actually make it better? And then while I'm sitting and actually build out that list also when I'm at Cord and kind of listening to other people talk, maybe there's a spin on the topic, or maybe there's a question that came to mind that I was like, oh, I wish they had covered this. And then maybe that plants the seeds to be like, oh, it's almost like the limitation sections of research, right? It's like they give you the words of like what needs to happen next. So if I ever have those moments while I'm listening to someone's talk, I was like, oh, I'll just do the next study then, right? Do the next talk, part 2 of this talk that kind of goes into that. So that's where you can kind of use other people's ideas to help really spark your own ideas as well. And then also if you're really stuck with the creative juices flowing, just meet with a friend. Right, just meet with someone that you trust and be like, let's just like throw things at the wall and see what sticks, right? I do this with a few of my friends too. Every year, I get a text usually around this time and they're like, you want to submit 1 or 2 talks together? I was like, yeah. And then we literally show up together on a Zoom call and we're just like, neither of us have ideas. And we're like, okay, now what are we going to do? And then we just kind of, toss ideas out to each other. And each year we do get a few of those submitted and accepted too, which is fun.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the just sitting down and throwing ideas around thing that Shree mentioned. It's so hard to come up with an idea on your own that's going to be interesting to more people than just you. I find that at least a place to start for me is what makes me comfortable, or rather uncomfortable, working with my learners, either on shift or in terms of doing their evaluations and that sort of thing. Remediation is always a big sticky topic that like is very hard for everybody. And like, so finding things that make you anxious or stressed out, then honestly doing the talk makes you feel more like an expert on that topic. It makes you feel better about it. So sometimes I'll intentionally pick as a base, like something that makes me feel anxious or uncomfortable so that I can force myself to get better at it.
All right, so as we kind of come down to the last few minutes of our conversation, or at least, this conversation, because we're going to have lots more conversations in the future. if you could look back at yourself on the very first proposal that you ever wrote and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be? Like just one? Are you
Yeah,
kidding
I
me?
was
I
like,
would
my gosh, I
give
have like
myself a whole laundry
I have a
list of
whole
things.
lot. Yeah, I do have a whole lot actually. I might choose my top three if that's okay. Just a few things. I sadly have.
Fine, fine, I'll
I
allow it. I'll
keep
allow
I
it.
keep a list of like lessons learned, so just so I don't have to keep learning the same lesson over and over again, even though I do. I think one is like seeking mentorship and guidance early. I think this is so important. It's just find a trusted, mentor that you can, get feedback, honest feedback about like, is this topic actually working or not, and how can you fix it? I think that's so important to then be able to submit a talk that's high quality, that has a higher potential of being accepted. When you're new to the game of writing proposals, then it gets really challenging to know what they're looking for, and it can feel really challenging. So having someone who's either goes to court a lot, knows the audience, has been part of committees at least, or at least have been to talks, that can really give you that perspective that you're really looking for. The second is really like learning what's been accepted. There's so much value in looking at past court talks and kind of seeing what themes have come out and what are the kind of common things that these different tracks are looking for that can really help you to then plant ideas about what you should be submitting to that, because common things being common and the popular ones get accepted for a reason, and they do get repeated in different reiterations throughout the year. So I think that's important, and keeping those in trend with the topics that are kind of current event topics can really make it much more likely to get accepted. And the last is definitely always just being mindful. The journey that we take is really hard. So who can you travel with to help you along the way, but who else can you bring with you on that journey? I think is so important, so that we're making it easier for those who are coming after us as well, I think is really important.
I guess, thinking about like how I got started and stuff, it's good to kind of like get good experience wherever you can in speaking. So I got my experience started with CPC, and I think that's an amazing way to get, started in being a speaker. And so I would say like winning CPC was one of the most useful things for me as a lecturer. And so like doing that, submitting to abstracts, innovations, getting some like ability to practice talking at those sessions is useful. And then when you're submitting, I would probably start off submitting to stuff like the resident track. They are always looking for great speakers and great topics, and the residents are amazing audience and stuff. So I find like, I wouldn't go straight for best practice, because I think that there's like almost no way your first talk's going to be for best practice. But, start off with, resident, maybe see them, maybe like, DEI and stuff like that. I think you submit like smaller talks, 10-minute talks with someone, and get some good experience over the years will be very helpful to like work your way up to more and more talks.
Yeah, and I would say being willing to take on the unfun topics would be my piece of advice, because someone needs that and someone's got to do it. So be willing to take on those topics and do your best.
I don't have any further advice to add. That was all amazing. So thank you guys for your expertise. Just a couple of housekeeping things as we kind of draw to a close here. So as we opened with saying, we are in the process of accepting proposals now. I'm going to put, for everybody who is actually live on the call right now, I'm going to put in the chat the link to the submission site. You will notice that we are using a different platform this year. So we are very excited about our new platform. Because of it, we've actually been able to build in a lot of front work details in the submission process that is going to make your lives easier later on in the year, especially if your proposal gets submitted. So just please feel free to kind of work your way through that new platform, through the new process. Take your time, reach out to us if you have any questions. We really are trying to make this like the best possible experience for you, the submitter, that it could possibly be. So thank you.
And
so
I
much.
will, just add, if you guys are looking for like mentorship or stuff, or you want someone to look at your submission, I volunteer. I'm happy to, if talk to anyone and look at some submissions and whatnot. Juliet's also down. She's very keen on, titles that pop. So, if you can make her laugh, then you're in. So yeah, I'm sure like you guys can get my email somehow and feel free to reach out.
Yeah, same here. And I think also just be thoughtful. You can also reach out to like the track chairs and all the rest of us on committees and stuff too. For example, if you have a DEI talk and wanted just a little bit of guidance and stuff too, we have a great core DEI committee as well too. CDM has great support as well too. So just our network, luckily EM is a small world in the med ed world. Also, we all want to help each other. So I think that's the beautiful part is that we want your voices to be heard and we want to help support you to do that. So just reach out to us if you have any questions or need that support.
Yeah, especially if you're new to the Cord family. I don't think I've ever reached out to anybody over my years of involvement in Cord and received a no or non-response. Everybody really is going out of their way in order to help each other. So please just ask somebody, even if you don't know who to ask somebody. So unless either Megan or Heather have any other like housekeeping things that I have forgotten to cover at this point in the game, we will say goodbye and so long and farewell to everybody. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for your questions and your participation. Thank you to our panelists for their expertise. Thank you to the board of directors and the Cord staff for making all of this possible. And I look forward to seeing everybody in Seattle, if not before.